Are you a forward thinker? Then you need an HR and finance platform that thinks like you do. Workday is the AI platform that helps propel your organization, your workforce, and your industry into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
The all-new 2026 Hyundai Palisade Hybrid doesn't just turn heads. It commands respect. With its stunning exterior, luxurious interior with available cabin seats, and spacious third-row seating and equipped with advanced technology, you and the family are making a statement before you even step out. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more and experience the all-new 2026 Palisade Hybrid today.
Hello and welcome to How We're the Podcast. It's Martin here, and today you join us for another episode of On This Week, where we take a look back at some of the highs and some of the lows that have happened on this week in the history of Sunderland AFC. Now, we don't have Chris with us this week. He might pop in later on, but we do have our other two regulars. So we'll first say hello to Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Martin. It's shaping up well already. We've just spent the last 15 minutes delving through the history books, trying to work a few things out. So we've had a good warm up, and now the game's kicked off. Let's see how we fare.
It's been a bit like a Sunderland book club for the last quarter of an hour, hasn't it? And the other member of that book club, of course, is Kelvin Beattie. Hello, Kelvin.
Morning, lads. How you doing?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, Chris hopefully will be with us in a little while, but we are going to kick off anyway. And Andrew, you left us last week with a quiz, which I have been pondering all week, and I still cannot figure out what on earth the answer is.
Okay, well, hopefully I will. Oh, Kelvin seems confident. Do you reckon you've got it, like?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think I was at that game, and I remember, if I have got it, I remember thinking that football as we know it had come to an end.
Well, yes, something happened for the first time in a Sunderland game on the 22nd of October, 1983, in a home game with Manchester United. What was it? And it was, of course, Kelvin, that we wore sponsors on our shirt for the first time. So,
can you remember who the sponsor was?
Kelvin, I've strap in because I've got a good 5 minutes on this. But Martin there's got a...
I'm going to be bloody traumatized by the time you've finished. Go on then.
Martin's got a rueful face there. Were you anywhere near getting that one, or has that completely stumped you?
No, that had completely stumped me. Yes, it's not even the one going, I should have got that. It's one of those, I was looking at the players, I was looking at the referee, I was looking at the managers, I was looking at other bits and pieces, but I didn't put two and two together and get the kit. No. But I should have known with you, Andrew. I should have known it would be related to the kit.
The fashion guru.
Fashion guru. I am literally sat here wearing a scruffy old sweater. Probably got dinner medals on it somewhere. Yeah, it was sponsors. But to be honest, you would look at a photo from that game and it wouldn't seem out of place now, having a sponsor on the shirt, because it's just second nature these days. But yeah, at the time, sponsorship was a real big hot potato. And of course, the company we had on the front of the shirts was Cowie's, which was the day job, as it were, of our owner, Tom Cowie, OBE, at the time. His main source of income was this absolutely huge transport and car sales company that he'd built up from the ground. And he decided now was the time for Sunderland to wear a sponsor on the shirt. And of course, it just so happened to be his company, which is, it's like when, owners of clubs get a sponsor that happen to be owned by the same family or from the same country or whatever. And you always think, little bit convenient that. Now, Cowie in general, as you've already intimated there, Kelvin, you said you might have a bit of scar tissue hanging around from that era still. He's quite a difficult figure for me because I do love a local boy done good. He built up this company from the ground in Millfield. I think he first did motorcycle repairs, and it grew from there. And Cowie's, I don't know if they changed to Arriva or they simply owned Arriva. Arriva is this absolutely huge bus transport firm. So really massive company that brought a lot of employment to the city, a lot of like good PR for Sunderland and the area. So it was a real success story from that point of view. But then Cowie's politics, I maybe personally disagree with, and certainly in terms of his running of the football club, he had quite an abrasive personality, and he was far from popular when he was at Roker Park. There was a lot of issues behind the scenes, a lot of rifts. So is that fair, Kelvin, to say that he was maybe a polarizing figure?
He was. Whatever his politics, his tenure as chairman, I think, could be described as, up and down, Marmite. You're right about a local boy done good. You couldn't fault him there. If you have a look at his charitable works and stuff like that, marvelous lad that way. But if we were, and this is what we're here talking about today, if we're talking about Sunderland Football Club, I don't honestly feel that he was particularly successful as a chairman, and he figures lots of times in, I suppose, what you would say in a parsimonious kind of way, where good players were perhaps being touted to come to the club, and his need to keep a tight hold on the purse strings meant that those players didn't come. I can always remember Lenny Asher's story about the Oxford lad, John Aldridge. Yeah, it felt like it just needed another 10 grand, and he would have been our player. And what a goal scorer John Aldridge was, and he seemed to like playing for Ashurst. But there does seem to be a number of times where the need to keep the purse strings tight meant that we didn't take that step forward. But that's my view. I'm sure there'll be other people that'll say, "Oh, he did this well, he did that well," and a lot of trouble in the boardroom, wasn't there? Not necessarily all to do with him, but Barry Batty, Bob Murray, that combination, Cowie and Batty's fallout and ability not to be able to get on with each other. I don't think it was a great tenure that he had as chairman.
I think he kind of staked everything. Sorry, Andrew. I think he kind of staked everything on McMenemy, didn't he? That was the big appointment, the big statement appointment. And of course, we all know how that unravelled and didn't play out. But I recall even when he'd left, he was still a very vocal critic of Bob Murray. And it was at least twice he was rumoured to be taking over the club again, wasn't he? So he was never too far away from having a voice, having an input, having an opinion on what was going on at Sunderland, even though 5, 6, 7, 8 years before that, he hadn't quite been successful as he would have wanted to be.
they were my first introductions into him, Martin. He was very outspoken. He made very big statements about Bob Murray's running of the club. And like you say, there were suggested takeovers from Cowie where he would say that he was going to make a bid and then it never happened. And I definitely remember people at the time saying, well, hang on, he's going on now as if he's got the grand plan and he's got the scheme. And yet he didn't carry any of these plans out when he was in charge. So it was a kind of like people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Maybe if he'd sold a couple more Ford Sierras or Ford Escorts, he might have afforded John Aldridge back in the day. To be fair, Kelvin, you have made a really good point there. I know I maybe don't agree with some of his politics, and I wonder how a Sunderland chairman who was a known Tory donor went down during the time of the miners' strikes and what have you. I would like to know a little bit more about that and how that impacted people's views on him. But he was a brilliant person in terms of charity donations. He did do a lot for the community in that respect. So that is amazing. That all credit to him for that. And also, he was a big figure in what is now Sunderland University. You know, there's a huge lecture hall that's named the Sir Tom Cowie Lecture Hall in his honour because he donated a lot of time and a lot of money. So that speaks well of him as an individual. And he clearly was a very smart businessman in the first place. That's how he's got to the position he was in, lads. Hence, when rules around sponsorship started to be relaxed, he was there and saw it as a good opportunity to plug his business. I know I was a bit cheeky about it earlier, but from his point of view, if you own one of the biggest employers in the town and you own the football club, stands to reason they're going to wear your logo on the shirt. The reason why it was Manchester United was that game was due to be on Match of the Day. So, of course, in those days, Match of the Day only had a couple of games each episode. It was the go-to broadcast for football fans. So it will have got millions upon millions of viewers, and they would have all, in his mind, seen this logo. So again, good business sense. The game, I don't know if you remember it, Kelvin, was a bit of a disputed one because we lost to a dodgy penalty and then really should have been given one ourselves that wasn't awarded. The logo was only small on the shirt, and it's only in later years that we started to use that bigger version that you see on reproductions nowadays.
Didn't they have stipulations about the size of the? Yeah, I seem to remember that. Yeah,
they did, and in later versions, the Cowie's logo was kind of on a white background, so it stood out a lot better. Whereas on this game, it was quite difficult to pick out because it didn't have a proper backing to it. So people were still naive about sponsorship and what have you. Obviously, the purists didn't like it. I think those that were against Cowie didn't like it because they already had issues with him, and now they can't watch their favourite players without getting that reminder in front of them of the Cowie's ownership. But anyway, after all of that, in like complete, true Sunderland fashion, the programme didn't go ahead anyway. The match. I don't know if you remember this, Kelvin, but Match of the Day was cancelled.
Yeah.
There was the BBC had like ongoing industrial action. Now, Jimmy Hill was due to present that episode, so maybe it was a good thing we weren't on. You know, you probably had people lining up their Rotten Tomatoes to throw at the TV at the Cowie's logo and at Jimmy Hill. So yeah, it didn't even go ahead. Instead, they showed on the BBC a film starring John Wayne, and then after that, a new series featuring Jasper Carrott, who apparently the musical guests on this episode were the Animals, and even that will have disappointed Sunderland fans because at that point Alan Price was not part of the lineup of the Animals.
There
So
you go. Yeah.
absolutely nothing on BBC One that night for Sunderland fans. Do you remember what the industrial strike was, Kelvin?
I think I can't remember the detail. I definitely remember much of the day not being on, which I sort of was quite pleased about because I thought it had been a spawny loss, you know. It was one of them games where I came away quite aggrieved at and Man United, who at that time, again, not speaking for everybody, but quite a few fans, you just loved to beat Man United. You know, they were a team who you felt were buying success, and it was always nice to beat them, you know. So I felt that they'd won that game off a poor refereeing decision, and I thought, as an ex-miner myself, I thought Tom Cowie got what he deserved.
Well, certainly the game did feel like we'd kind of been stiffed out of at least a draw. This issue with the BBC had started a fortnight previously, and it was about allowances for outside broadcast staff. So it wasn't really anything to do with Match of the Day at the start of it. But what happened was a tennis tournament at Brighton wasn't shown. The opening days of the World Snooker Championships were also impacted. So BBC management then drafted in a load of cover so that they could show a Frank Bruno fight.
Yeah.
And that in turn caused the unions to say, you know, we're not having any sort of like outside labour. We're just going to black out as many live shows as possible. So that's
Andrew,
why Match of the Day got dragged in.
Yeah.
Dragged into it.
They should have had the flying pickets on Jasper Carrott here. That would have sorted them out.
The Flying Pickets, who Margaret Thatcher actually said were her favourite band, and I don't think anybody knows if she was being sarcastic or if she had no idea of what they were about.
She wasn't really noted for her sense of humour, Margaret Thatcher. So yeah.
But yeah, it was this BBC issue that had the knock-on impact. I'll come to Frank Bruno in a second, but yeah, it's got on the, you know, it's this episode is going to go in all sorts of tangents. But in all seriousness, this wasn't a great development for Sunderland fans. So okay, they got a couple of weeks without having to watch Jimmy Hill do his usual sanctimonious spiel. But at the same time as the BBC action, the government were embroiled in quite an embarrassing High Court defeat with BT engineers over their strike action that was happening at the time. And as a result, this is one of the things that Thatcher and her colleague used as like the breaking point to toughen up trade union laws, which, as we know, had impacts in the coming years. Not just Sunderland fans, and not all Sunderland fans were miners, so I shouldn't have said that. But certainly Sunderland is in a region that was impacted heavily by a lot of strike action and a lot of changes to trade union laws. So it did have a longer term effect on Sunderland and County Durham and the North East's prospects. And my last question, Frank Bruno, I've got it in my mind, lads. Is he a Sunderland fan, or have I made that up?
No, he is to some extent. I'm not sure to what extent or not, but he's definitely been at a number of Sunderland games. He was actually in the Royal Box at Wembley for the playoff final in May.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So yes, he has been known to come along and cheer on the lads in red and white. So there you go.
Well, there
Go
you
on,
go. There's
Frank, lad.
Aye. Frank Bruno, this is maybe for another pod. I think Frank Bruno was a really inspirational figure in British sport, British boxing history. I think he got made a figure of fun a lot on TV, but he was actually a quality boxer, and from what I can gather, and a real inspirational figure. But there you go. There is a dinner party for you. Tom Cowie, Margaret Thatcher, Frank Bruno. I'll sit down at the dinner table with those three and see what they have to say about their memories of the game against Manchester United all those years ago.
Now we can claim Frank Bruno. We can claim Ian Botham for a while. We've got some pretty high level sports stars who come along and cheer us on now and again. So no, we're not doing too badly. Steve Cram, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
you got loads.
Sadly, Chris isn't here, but at Monkwearmouth School in our PE department, there used to be a photo of Steve Davis on the wall. And I seem to think Steve Davis married into a Sunderland family. So there you go. There's another world champion, Steve Davis. He might have had a slight red and white leaning to him as well.
Yeah, we can start collecting them, can't we? Right, we'll get on with this week. So we are doing the 20th to the 26th of October. Now, my cursory research suggests that the 20th of October is an exceptionally good day for Sunderland. Do you know why?
Ooh.
I'm talking football. So, yeah, for Sunderland Association Football Club. I'm not talking about the city or anything like that. Just the football club. An exceptionally good day.
So it wasn't that Frank Bruno had a title fight or anything like that all the Sunderland fans watched.
Potentially, but not that I know of.
No. Oh. No, I'm struggling with that one.
So I reckon, and I'm here to be corrected by somebody listening if this is not the case, but I reckon this is the day that we've got our highest win ratio.
Oh,
so
very good.
We've played 18 games on the 20th of October. We've won 14 of them, drawn 2, and only ever lost twice in our history on the 20th of October. And I spotted that and I thought, that's a bloody good win ratio. So I went through every single day and I couldn't find a better ratio. Now, there are days, of course, where we've played significantly more games. Boxing Day, for example, we played 100 games. New Year's Day, we played 60-odd games. But 20th of October, we played 18 and we've won 14 and drawn 2. Only ever got beat twice. So I reckon that is potentially the best day in our history so far.
That is top marks for the research there, Martin. That's some dedication to go through the facts and figures.
Brilliant. What a start! What a start!
It's all downhill after 20th of October, I can tell you. But you won't be surprised that there's a few notable victories on the 20th of October. But we'll start off in 1926 because Albert McEnroy, goalkeeper for Sunderland, we've spoken about him briefly before. He became the first Sunderland goalkeeper to be capped by England to play the game at Anfield against Ireland. It was a 3-3 draw. And I suspect he's the only Sunderland goalkeeper to be capped by England because Pickford had left. Like he'd just gone to Everton when he got his first cap for England, hadn't he? So I can't think of anybody else who would have been capped.
I think he's our only England cap. Can I just check though, Martin? You know that last one where you've done all the research into the 20th being like high proportion for us. How devastated would you have been if me and Kelvin had gone, oh yeah, everybody knows that the information's all out there anyway. You've just wasted.
No, you're wrong. It's the 19th.
yeah. But no, the goalkeeper thing. I think he was the only player still on our books at the time to get a call up. He was a tremendous goalkeeper by all accounts.
Yeah, no,
we've had a huge number of Scottish international keepers as well, haven't we? Which is just to edge in about Scotland there, but it is it proximity to the border? You know, we have only had one England international goalkeeper that's played for us whilst at Sunderland. Yet we've had all these Scottish international keepers that have played, you know.
I was just going to say, I seem to think one of the reasons Craig Gordon was happy to come to Sunderland was he appreciated the fact he was still relatively close and he could get back up and visit family quite quick. So there's a practical reason to that. But I think just traditionally, we've always had well, obviously, our founder was Scottish. So there has always been a link with north of the border. Sorry, Martin, go on.
No, that's all good. I was going to say congratulations to anybody who had 23 minutes for Kelvin to mention Scotland. Those bingo cards for on this week are selling like hotcakes. 1940 was the birth of Neil Martin. Now, he was the last Sunderland player to score 20 goals in top flight before Kevin Phillips did that for us. And who knows, we might break that record again this year. Fingers crossed.
Just on Neil Martin, sorry to interrupt you there, Martin. I saw this lad play, you know. What a centre forward he was. He had a cracking reputation amongst the Sunderland fans as being a good centre forward. He just arrived at the club at the wrong time, really. You know, we were a club that, even though he'd been managed internationally by Ian McCall, you know, the club was in all sorts of disarray in the dressing room and what have you. But he scored 100 goals in the top tier in Scotland and the top tier in England. And Sunderland had another player that did that as well after him. Do you have any idea who that was?
Annoyingly, no. That's not.
He'll be Joe Baker.
Ah, there you go.
So we had two. The reason why Joe Baker doesn't spring to mind is he didn't really score that many goals for us when he came, and he came at the end of his career. But he was another lad from north of the border that came down and did really well for other teams. But Neil Martin, what a player, and threatened a great partnership with John O'Hare, who McCall sold. I never understood why they sold him when he was shaping up to in such a way with Neil Martin. But cracking centre forward Neil Martin.
Very good. Now, we've talked about the 20th of October being a good day for Sunderland in terms of getting 3 points. And on the 20th of October 1962, we beat Walsall at home 5-0. Jimmy Davison got 2 goals. Stan Anderson, Brian Clough and George Mulhall each bagged 1. 1979, we played QPR at home. And there was 2 first-half goals from Pop Robertson, another from John Hawley to give us all 2 points, as we should make sure that we say. But there was a little quirk in this game, and this is another strip quirk as well. Can you remember what this one was, Kelvin? I know Andrew. I can tell by Andrew's face he knows this one. But
sad
this one?
Andrew.
It wasn't to do with the numbers, was it, on the strips? No,
it was not.
It's not coming.
It was the badge on the front of the strips, Kelvin, was quite familiar, though, if that's a bit of a clue for you. QPR.
The badge on QPR strips was very familiar.
Yes.
You know, I've got it. QPR played in our strips. Our second strip, didn't they, that day?
They played in our blue away shirt.
Ooh.
Yeah. QPR, bizarrely, the season before, had travelled up to Sunderland and been allowed to wear their traditional blue and white hoops. So just assumed it was going to be okay again. But when they turned up, the referee must have looked in their kit bag and said, nah, not having that. And because they hadn't brought a reserve, like a backup option, they had to borrow our blue away kit. So
it's a worry if the ref cannot tell the difference between a hoop and a stripe, mind.
Couple of points on that. I seem to think playing in goal for QPR was Chris Woods, who then played the final ever game at Roker Park. So he'd appeared for a team wearing Sunderland shirts long before he signed for us. And Johnny Hawley, who scored in that game, not our Johnny Hawley from the pod, but the original Johnny Hawley who played for us and who we've mentioned about. We've mentioned him before. I led to believe that he travelled up recently to take part in George Forster's birthday celebrations. George Forster from the Supporters Association. So, just nice touch from Johnny Hawley. He obviously values his time at Sunderland and valued some of the relationships he made. But as well, George Forster's just obviously such a popular guy that he's got former footballers from decades previously making an effort to see him on his birthday. So that, just shows
Fantastic.
what a guy he is.
He was a sumptuous player on his day, Johnny Hawley.
Very good, very good. In the QPR team that day as well, Chris Woods, as Andrew says, was in goal. There was 3 players who were big names in Newcastle in the 80s in their team as well. David McCreary, Glenn Roeder and Paul Goddard all played for QPR that day. 1990, we beat Luton at home 2-0 in the First Division. Marco Gabbiadini gets his obligatory mention. That's 30 minutes, if anybody has Marco on their bingo card. And Peter Davenport both got goals in the first half for us, 2-0. Alec Chamberlain was in goal for Luton that day. Then 3 years later, we played Luton again, won 2-0 again. Alec Chamberlain was in goal for us. Martin Smith on his debut scored a free kick after 90 minutes to make it 2-0. Don Goodman had already scored on 12 to give us the lead. We talk about Jamie Lawrence making his debut at Middlesbrough on last week's episode. This was his full debut. The nighttime game, Terry Butcher was the manager. 2018 was Luke O'Nine's first goal for Sunderland. We beat Shrewsbury 2-0. I think he came on as a late sub for Jerome Sinclair, and that was the first of 23 goals, unless he scores against Wolves. We are recording this before the Wolves game. If he scores against Wolves, he'll have more than 23, but he's got 23 goals so far. And exactly 1 year ago, we played Hull City away, and Wilson Isdor scored that goal where he ran from the edge of the box, took the ball up the field and netted to give us the victory. We will take a short break there. We'll be back very soon.
Finished training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the Dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to How We're the Podcast, and you join us for another episode of On This Week, and we are on the 21st of October. Now, 1911, 2 goals from George Holly gave Sunderland a 2-0 win at Sheffield United. In 1961, we beat Preston 1-0 at Deepdale. Charlie Hurley with the goal for Alan Brown's side. 1978, 2 goals from Gary Rowell and 1 from the other Alan Brown gave Sunderland a 3-2 win over Millwall. And in 2006, Sunderland beat Barnsley 2-0. Dean Whitehead and Chris Brown Alan Brown's son got the goals. This was a game Lewin Nyatanga, who was on loan from Derby, I think, came on as a half-time sub. For Barnsley, Colin Healy, who had been a Sunderland player a few years earlier, Mick McCarthy, I think, had signed Colin Healy, hadn't he? And he obviously had terrible troubles with injuries in his time at Sunderland, but he came off the bench for Barnsley. And Paul Heckenbottom was an unused sub for Barnsley that day. So Paul Heckenbottom, of course, people know him better now as manager at Preston currently, I think, and he has been at Sheffield United and Barnsley. He joined Sunderland from Manchester United as a young player and didn't actually make a first-team appearance, but he went on to have a very good career at different clubs, and yes, he was an unused sub on that day at the Stadium of Light. 2017, this was a game, and we're talking about low lights. This whole season was a low light, but we drew 3-3 at Brentford at Griffin Park. We were 3-1 up, but we got pegged back in the second half to 3-3. John Egan was in the Brentford team, and Chris Mepham was on the bench. Chris Mepham, of course, who was at Sunderland on loan last season. We'll move on to October the 22nd. Now, this is an interesting one. This is one of the things that we were having a bit of a chat about before we started recording. So 1887, this was the day that we recorded our first ever FA Cup win. We beat Morpeth Harriers 3-2. Well, we'd won the first game 4-2, but we were ordered to replay the game. 2 goals from George Monaghan and 1 for Sammy Stewart sealed the win at the second attempt. But I think we figured out that this game was replayed because we'd fielded an ineligible player, and also the game afterwards was replayed as well, wasn't it? Because of a bad light we played. It was Newcastle West End we played, and it seemed to be some bad light, and they'd complained afterwards, and that had to be replayed. Obviously, nobody's got any memories of that game, but there was some interesting things when we were sifting through the books there to try to figure out and piece things together, wasn't it?
It was quite nice to Morpeth's my hometown. That's where I was born, so I didn't even know that that Morpeth Harriers had played Sunderland. So it was nice to have a look at that. Yeah.
Very good. 1889, we beat Sheffield Wednesday 2-0 at home. Arthur Saxton and Hughie Wilson with the goals. 5 years later, we beat Sheffield Wednesday 3-0. Walter Watkins got 2 on his debut, and Billy Hogg missed a penalty, scored a goal, and then became the first Sunderland player to be sent off in a home game. He was booked on 83 minutes. And obviously, they didn't have yellow cards and stuff in those days, but you booked on 83 minutes and sent off on 84 minutes. Now, the interesting thing when you looked at this game, the referee was from Glasgow, which you don't tend to get referees coming from Scotland too often. So I'm not sure if that was a common occurrence back in the day or that was a one-off, but yeah, the ref was from Glasgow. 1955, Sunderland went to the top of Division 1 with a 3-2 win at Spurs. In 1988, we beat Swindon Town 4-0 at home. We scored 2 goals in each half. I remember one being a very good goal by Billy Whitehurst. He didn't score very many for us, but I remember that one being a very good goal, and the diving header in the full well end against Leeds at home being a highlight.
I was just going to say Whitehurst had a rampant game that day. He was all over the shop.
That game. That was one of the occasions where it looks as if him and Marco Gabbiadini could form a good partnership and cause them trouble.
Absolutely. Can you remember who the sub was that day? This lad's always stuck in my memory.
It was
a lad for Sunderland. Aye.
It wasn't a lad called Paul McKenzie, was it?
It wasn't. It was a fullback who
Gary
was bought
Ogilvie?
from Gary Ogilvie. Yeah.
There we go.
Who used to delight in the nickname of Ginger Gary. He was he had the reddest hair. I actually thought that lad was a decent player, but he never really got a chance to strut his stuff. I think he would just sub. I can't recall him ever starting a game. And then within a season, he was gone again, back up to Airdrie. I think he went to, and didn't make it. I don't think he played many games up there. But I thought he was a good player. I saw him play a couple of times in the reserves. for us when he first came, and just by chance I was down doing some delivering training in Newcastle and had the chance to shoot and see the reserves play a couple of games, and I thought he was going to be a good fullback for you. He's a great big lad. He was about 6 foot and could shift, but Ginger Gary, there you go.
I seem to think it must have been Chris that was talking about him recently. I think.
No, I think I mentioned him. I can't remember what context it was in, but
didn't he
we
go
talked
the
very
point?
briefly.
Yeah,
he had
didn't he go
a long career in the police force in Scotland after he went back up to Scotland, played a few games, had a long career in the police, and then he went back into football. He was director of football or something at one of his former clubs, up until recently. So, yeah, no, he was always one of those names who, because obviously you could only name 2 subs at this point. So he was one of the names that kept coming on the bench every now and again, but rarely got used. And Paul McKenzie was a forward who actually never played. He was on the bench now and again. I think in the 89 season, he popped on the bench now and again.
Right. Yeah.
Just to tie up a couple of possible loose ends there with you mentioning the police. We did mention Ian Botham earlier, didn't we? That was in the pod. That wasn't
Yes, no, that was
yeah.
We were recording at the time, yes.
Yes. You've got to be careful. You've always got to know if you're recording or not. Some of the things we talk about. I'll just leave that there. Ian Botham and Billy Whitehurst, I believe, were around the club at the same time and enjoyed the Sunderland nightlife quite a lot. And I believe the police might have had a word and politely suggested that the Botham's informal training with the club might need to be curtailed a bit. Does that ring any bells with anyone?
It did. They had to send a message in a bottle to Ian Botham to.
Yeah. You're.
It was all, I'm sure, blown wildly out of proportion.
No, you're on your own with that one, Andrew. Yeah. If the flag comes, you'll need to catch that yourself, mate.
Thanks. Nice to know I've always got your back in, gents.
Good. October the 23rd, 1897, Newcastle Road Ground had its highest attendance, around 22,000, packed in for a 0-0 goalless draw with Aston Villa. Now, that isn't the game that the famous painting's from. I think that was a few years earlier. But that was obviously a big game. Aston Villa and Sunderland were the 2 top teams in the country at the time, and both were up there challenging for league titles and winning league titles. 1920, Sunderland drew 2-2 at Bradford City, with a few players making their debuts: Charlie Parker, Jack Milton and Bobby Marshall. Marshall became Sunderland's youngest scorer at that point, 17 and a half years old. Obviously, Chris Rigg has beaten, I think, obviously Jimmy Hamilton, somebody who we've spoken to, Kelvin's spoken to and we've spoken about, kind of fall into that category as well. What was interesting was on the same day, there was a full international played at Roker Park. 22,000 people came along to see England play Ireland, beaten 2-0. And Charlie Buchan was an unused sub in that game. 1937, Rach Carter got a hat-trick against West Brom. We played them at the Hawthorns. Bobby Gurney, Percy Saunders and Johnny Spuler got the other goals. I'm presuming that's how you pronounce that one. 1961, Johnny Crossan was signed from Standard Liège for 16,750 quid, Kelvin.
I just wanted to leap in and tip me hat to Johnny Crossan. I never saw this lad play. I just missed him. I always wish, I say this every week, don't I? I wish I'd seen him play. It's just tantalising to being so close to seeing Johnny Crossan play. Really interesting player. Used to some of the fans when I first started going, they used to call him Crew Cut Johnny. If you see the photographs of of him in the days. He's always got this crew cut, and he was a bit of a. Andrew would have had a lot of sport with Johnny Crossan. He was a bit of a fashion gurista, Crossan. He always wore the best clothes, and he looked the part when he come on the pitch. He was quite a handsome lad, but he was an absolute steal from Standard Liège, an absolute steal again. That Alan Brown's scouting network, But he was when we went up, top goal scorer. He scored goals, he created goals. But when we went up, and then Ian McCall eventually joined the club as manager, he was allegedly part of the Catholic period of players going out, because he went off to Man City and skippered them to under Malcolm Allison and Joe Mercer, and skippered them. He's held in really high esteem at City. I had a mate when I worked in Doncaster. He lived sort of, I think I've said before, we had a right football enclave in the street that we lived in, and this lad was a fanatical Man City fan, and he loved the bones of Johnny Crossan. There's a great documentary on the BBC iPlayer about Johnny Crossan. It's called The Trophy Shop, which is when he eventually retired to back to Derry, which is where he was from. He eventually opened a trophy shop, which for a lot of years, loads and loads of years, was it became sort of a real sort of, I've lost the word that I'm looking for, but a real place to visit in Derry, where you'd always get a bit of crack. There'd always be a bit of banter. I'm not sure how much business would be going on, but it was a bit like the Barbers on that. It always reminded me of the Barbers on Desmond's, the old comedy program, where there was more crack than business going on. His nickname was Jobby in Ireland as well. He was a fantastic story. He was still playing for foil harps. He was still pulling the strings for foil harps at the age of 43. A really interesting character, Johnny Crossan.
Who had Desmond's on their Aware the Podcast bingo card? Because fair play. If
wild card one, isn't it? It's a wild card.
If you've just won that, well done. Kelvin, this is meant with love, so please don't take this the wrong way. But you know how some people have done the 92 grounds and have been to every ground, and you must have a mate at all 92 clubs. This is always a nice story with, and I remember talking to my mate who was a Man City fan, or yes, I was talking to, just name a club, and Kelvin, you'll have a nice connection with them.
So just for the record, I worked in Doncaster for a year, and it's a really, really sort of cosmopolitan area. There's a lot of people sort of from out with that area go and live there, because you can get loads and loads of places from Doncaster. It used to be a bit of a joke amongst the Doncaster people that every bugger's always leaving Doncaster, because you could get anywhere. Everywhere was within 2 hours from Doncaster, But there was I've said it before, Johnny Waters, the Sunderland club physio, his brother lived across the road from us. And I came home from a Mansfield game, a midweek game in the late 80s. I remember getting out the car, and the boy across the road, his car pulled up, and Johnny Waters got out of the car. And that's when I used to look at this boy and think, he reminds me of somebody, And one day I went to speak to him, and he was speaking, and I was thinking, who is he? Who is he? And then that night, I realized as I was getting out my cards, it's Johnny Waters. You knew straight away that it was his brother, when you saw the two of them together. really, it was a right enclave, that football enclave. I worked for a year in Stoke-on-Trent as well, which meant that there was loads of Liverpool, Man United, Man City. There was loads and loads of fans from different clubs. I was a miner there, and there was loads of lads, incomers from other cities and what have you. So I did end up. Yeah, you are right. I do sort of know a lot of people from a variety of different clubs. I haven't got too many Southern supporting pals. Most of them are, the Northwest or Yorkshire kind of area. Yeah.
It speaks volumes of you, Kelvin, as a nice fella, but it also speaks volumes, I think, just football. You'll always, if you've got nothing else to talk about to a stranger, it invariably goes back to football. And one thing I will say, there's another one for the bingo card I wasn't expecting. Doncaster is, in your words, cosmopolitan. Now, listen, I've been to Doncaster. It's actually a nice place. I know a good friend of mine lives there, so I'm not being critical of Doncaster, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody ever describe it as cosmopolitan before, I must admit.
Some of the funniest football crack I ever got was at Bellevue on a Friday night, watching Donny Rovers play, along with 20 guys and a dog that had broken into the ground.
See, I thought Kelvin said he was drinking a Cosmopolitan in Doncaster, didn't he?
Oh, that might have been it. Although, having been on a night out in Doncaster, there wasn't many lads ordering Cosmopolitans.
It was a regular stop off for us. When we were travelling to away games a lot, we used to regularly stop in Doncaster on the way home. If we'd been at Leicester, Nottingham, these places were regular. Used to stop in Donny for a few beers. There was a couple of good nightclubs as well that would accommodate with. Yeah.
Is that why you ended up living there?
Well, when he was talking about a year here and a year there, it sounds like he's on the bloody run. No wonder he's got so many friends in different places.
They all have special skills as well.
I wasn't called Kelvin down there, Martin, I'll tell you. I'd need to look up what name I was going under when I was...
Yeah, we'll have to keep that one quiet. You never know who's listening to you. 1993, we beat West Brom at home 1-0 with a goal from Richard Ord. 2010, we played Aston Villa at home and won 1-0 with an own goal from Richard Dunn. And on the 23rd of October, just last year, 2024, that was a game that we beat Luton away 2-1 with goals from Chris Rigg and Romain Mundle. Now, of course, we all know how the season panned out. We all know what happened to Luton. We all know, of course, what happened to us. But at the time, that seemed like a massive victory. Luton had just got relegated from the top flight and they'd actually done pretty well and given it a bit of a go compared to the other teams that had gone up in the Premier League. But it's kind of funny how quickly, and we've experienced it going the other way, haven't we? But how quickly your fortunes can change in football. Because that night seemed like quite a pivotal one where we were like, you know what, we've actually got a bloody chance this season.
It was a physical battle, which a lot of the times it is against Luton. So yeah, it was a real marker of, we can come here to compete and match teams. Luton were decent, and I don't know why the wheels came off there. But I remember at full time, it got a bit feisty as well. I think Chris Mepham, who was touched upon earlier, Chris Mepham had a bit of push and shove at full time, and there was a little bit of niggle in the game. So for a young Sunderland team to stand up, Martin, I think you're dead right. It was crucial, that win.
No, I think it was one of those games where you saw the backbone that the young side had. And you look at some games that happen during the course of the season, don't you? And you kind of think, you know what, if that hadn't happened to that extent, you don't know how the next months and so sort of continue. And I just think the fact that they were able to stand up and had a really physical game, as you say, and we were able to withstand that pressure. If you look at the playoff semi-final where we were beaten down there a couple of years previously, similar atmosphere there, and there was injury problems and all that sort of stuff going into that game. But this team last year stood up to that crowd and that, the physical threat of people like Carlton Morris and other players like that. And I think that kind of made it click in the players' heads. That shit, we can actually do this. And also it was a massive, massive victory for Lebris as well. Still very early on in his career. We'd had a good start, but that was a big result. And I think it's one of those that kind of goes underestimated because of what happened to Luton subsequently in the sort of second half of the season.
Totally agree with you, lads, on that. Having spent decades watching them, by and large, muscle us, they just seemed to be a team that had the edge physically over us on lots and lots of occasions. One of the few times that they didn't was they rolled into Roker Park in the 1973 Cup run and didn't turn up that day. It actually was a damp squib of a game, but so unusual for Luton to do that. What you were used to was them coming and bullying you. They always seem to have a team that could bully you, So I enjoyed that game, not for the purest football, but for the way we flexed our muscles, if you want. It was really enjoyable for that.
Did you stop off on the way home in Doncaster and go to one of your favourite old haunts, Kelvin, by any chance?
I wasn't at the game.
Well, you went straight to the nightclub, did you?
Stopped in Doncaster. I'm really glad I told you that.
We'll move on to October the 24th. Now, this was another subject that we were talking about before we started recording. So 1891. Sunderland played West Bromwich Albion at Newcastle Road. We beat them 4-0. And this game was notable for a couple of things. One, it was the first time that goal nets were used in a Sunderland home game. And also it was the first penalty that we were given at home, and we scored it. Johnny Campbell was the player who scored that was one of 3 goals. He got a hat-trick that day. Jock Smith got the other goal for Sunderland. But we were having a look into penalties, weren't we? Because penalty kicks were only awarded, began to be awarded at the start of this season. I think, Kelvin, you found a couple of interesting things out, didn't you, about penalties? Because they're not exactly how we know and sometimes love, sometimes hate penalties today.
Yeah. I didn't know this at all. The question that you threw at us before we went on air really sent me scuttling to the absolute record. I'm sitting looking at here, and about penalties. It's I didn't know this. The penalty kick was introduced in September 1891 at the start of Sunderland's second league campaign. Initially, a penalty had to be appealed for and was given for only a limited number of offences: holding, tripping and deliberate handball. You could headbutt and kick and stab somebody, but yeah. Bizarrely, the penalty could be taken anywhere along the 12-yard line that was drawn, so the penalty spot wasn't in place at that point. That wasn't introduced till 1902-1903 season. And the goalkeeper as well, he could advance off his line 6 yards, so you didn't have to stay on his line. He could come out 6 yards. How they measured the 6 yards, I don't know, because when I think about some of the photographs that I've seen of games at that time, I'm sure there wasn't a 6-yard box, was there?
I know you had almost like the big D, didn't you, on the goal line, which I presume was that the 12-yard line? Or is that...
Maybe. I don't know. That's a question, isn't it? If anybody knows the answer to that, could be that could be the. It seems when I think of that D, it seems bigger than 6 yards, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does.
We will. I feel like we're on the spot here. Do you?
I put you on the spot anyway. There you go. 1958 was the debut of Martin Harvey, born in Belfast, and he played 358 games for Sunderland. Now, the interesting thing with this, and I love a little bit of football symmetry here, Martin Harvey made his debut away at Plymouth. He was on the coaching staff at Plymouth, and that is where he was living at the end of his career and passed away living in Plymouth, I think 6 years ago, 2019, I think he passed away. So there's a nice little sort of little story weaved through Martin Harvey there with Plymouth heavily involved.
Is this why Chris isn't able to make this week's episode? Because he knew we'd be talking about Martin Harvey, and it makes him get all shy and embarrassed.
Hey, you might have hit something there, mightn't you? 1998, we beat Bury at home 1-0, and that took us to the top of Division 1, as it is a second tier. Obviously, it was that season under Peter Reid where we went up with a then record number of points. But the interesting thing about this game is that we won 1-0, went to the top of the league, and we stayed there for the rest of the season. So that was it. Once we were up there towards the end of October, we stayed there. I will say Danny Dichio got the goal. 1999, a year later, we played West Ham away. This was a game that Steve Bold got sent off. I think he headbutt Paulo Wanchop from memory. Is that 19 minutes he got sent off? Kevin Phillips scored shortly afterwards. But Trevor Sinclair, who we spoke about last week, because he scored the goal in Howard Wilkinson's first game for West Ham. Obviously, Wilkinson took over from Peter Reid, and we played West Ham at home. Sinclair, who had been lined up to join Sunderland a year before, scored the goal in that game. He scored a last-minute winner on this occasion to deny Sunderland all 3 points. 2008, Carlos Edwards, who was always a favourite player of mine, even though he actually didn't play that much for us. He kind of joined in the second half of that promotion season and then did fantastically well and got a couple of injuries early on the following season and didn't play that much after that. But he was a great player for us in a very short burst. But he was born in Trinidad on the 24th of October, 2008. Also on that day, if we go back to 1974, there was a game at Roker Park, European Cup, Winners' Cup, second round, first leg, and Kelvin Sporting Lisbon were in town.
Oh, there were, lads, there were, and it was this turned out to be the last European game played at Roker Park. And today we've moved to the Stadium of Light, but we haven't played a competitive European game since, have we? That's all going to change in the next couple of years, I'm telling you. I can feel it in my water. But anyway, we'd beaten Vasas Budapest over the two leg, and we got drawn against Sporting Lisbon. And what happened with this? One of the unusual things that happened was the draw was made on the 5th of October. By the 6th of October, on the 5th, we were playing Sporting in Lisbon in the first leg and then would have them back to ours for the second leg, which always felt like an advantage to play the away leg first. On the next day, the UEFA changed it around because there was a clash with Benfica, were scheduled to play Ujpest Doza, and the UEFA decided that they changed the running order of that, obviously feeling that the UEFA Cup was held more esteem than the Cup Winners' Cup. That seemed to be the logic. There was a rule. I always remember the newspaper report at that time, because I really felt we were on a roll. I thought we were going to go and win this European Cup Winners' Cup, and I was a bit upset about it being swapped, because I thought we'll go out there, we'll keep ourselves in the tie, we'll bring them back to Roker, and we'll absolutely thrash these these European giants, which Sporting Lisbon were. They had a huge history of going quite far in these tournaments, but the legs were reversed, and the secretary at the time, Ron Linney, said that there was nothing we could do about it. There was a rule in situ, and we had to abide by that rule. Another thing that Ron Linney said before the game, you'll remember, is talking about the Vassas game and the home leg where the price of tickets was doubled. And the directors obviously learnt from that experience against Vassas and agreed that everybody could get in for free. Obviously, I'm kidding you there. The directors didn't learn at all from that experience and kept the prices, doubled the prices still for the Sporting game. And Ron Linney, I think he was feeling under a bit of pressure about this issue, and he was quick to tell the papers that we had record receipts for the Vassas game in the home leg of £28,719. I had to write that figure down, lads. I'm not remembering that right off the back of my head. But so we'd had record receipts for that home tie, and he was anticipating that we would break that record in the next leg. One or two other things before the game. There was a bit of bad press for Sporting Lisbon. They had 3 of their players was arrested and fined £20 each for shoplifting from Boots on Northumberland Street in Newcastle. They'd stolen some audio cassettes and they were sent home in disgrace, those 3 players. But my memory of that, and from what I've been, I had remembered it as they weren't necessarily big first team players. They were part of the squad, and I've tried to nail whether they were or they weren't, and whether it impacted upon them at all. The only way I think it impacted upon them was you could name 5 subs, and Sporting named 3 on the night. You could name 5 and play 2. And Sporting named 3 on the night. They had whether it was the incident with those 3 players or not, but they locked themselves behind closed doors in that Peterlee base. They were based at Peterlee for that time across here, and Sunderland offered the Washington training complex for them. I think the weather had been a bit inclement, and Sunderland quite fairly offered the Washington training complex, offered to fix up, a visit to Roker Park, but they refused and just locked themselves behind closed doors for the, obviously not soon enough. If they'd locked themselves behind closed doors before the shoplifting trip to Northumberland Street, maybe there wouldn't have been all that bother. Bob Stokoe was at it before the game. I think I said the last time he was a wily bugger, Bob, when he was being interviewed. You could never work out exactly what the plan was. He'd tell one reporter one thing, he'd tell another reporter something else. He was hard to keep track of. But he said his team were about to play their 13th cup tie, undefeated. Under Bob, he definitely had a cup team at his disposal. And his words to the Journal in this sense were, "Our approach will be the same. We have to attack when we can attack, and defend when we have to defend." So that was Uncle Bob's logic going into the game. But I think that was for the press. I think he had a plan. Bobby Kerr, there was worries about him. He'd had a pretty heavy cold, but he was expected to play. The player who wasn't going to play was Ron Guthrie. He had a calf strain, and to my delight, one of my favourite players ever, an 18-year-old Joe Bolton, came in for him and I was very, very happy about that. Billy Hughes, he just needed one goal to make it to 50 in first team football. So that was something that was being, the press had touted that up a bit, and we were hopeful that Billy would choose that game to break that 50 goal mark. The other thing that Bob Stoker was at, again, I can remember this from the day before. He was warning youngsters to stay off the pitch. Bob was almost, you could almost see Brian Clough doing something like this. You sort of warning the youngsters to stay off the pitch, and threatened to close all the boys' gates as a punishment if they didn't stay off the pitch. And he dropped a little clanger because he said, "We'll close all the boys' gates if they don't stop doing this, like Newcastle have done."
Yeah.
And of course, I'm thinking, if I was a young Sunderland fan, I'd be thinking, "I bugger you, Bob, and Newcastle. I'm on the pitch, mate." But it did seem to have a little effect. But he was well irritated by that. Was Stoke, or the young fans running on the pitch. He confirmed the signing of Rod Belfort on the day of this game. He signed Rod Belfort from Everton, and I think that was really saying that he did need to bolster the squad. He felt he had 11 players, but not too much in reserve, and he bought Rod Belfort for 65,000 from Everton. Belfort was an interesting player because he could play up front or as a centre-back stroke sweeper. He was quite an interesting player, but we didn't see too much of him, in fairness. And he was reputed to be trying to get hold of either Eddie Kelly or Phil Bosma. Eddie Kelly from Arsenal was a very highly renowned player, and Phil Bosma was a lad who'd attracted a lot of attention in the Liverpool squad. He just couldn't break into quite often he was sub Bosma and couldn't break into that great Liverpool team at the time. So it was sort of quite exciting, the thought of that. When you looked at our bench that was named that night, you could sort of see where Stoker was coming from. There wasn't an awful lot of experience on the bench, but there were young players to be excited about. So we'll come to the game itself. He's got Montgomery, Malone, Joe Bolton, David Young is playing, Dave Watson in defence, Kerr, Horswell, and Ian Porterfield are in the midfield, and Billy Hughes, Vic Hallam, Dennis Stewart up front. And on the bench, he's got Ray Ellison, who's probably the only real bit of experience there. That was a lad from Newcastle that he brought in, defender. And then we've got John Lathan, Mick McGivern, Bobby Mitchell. That lad was, I think I said this the last time, but I'd seen him play quite a bit for the youth team. What a fantastic player he was. South Shields lad, but he never really got a decent go. But he was on the bench, and Trevor Swinburne, that was the backup goalie. We'd played a lot of games coming into this game, and one thing that Stoker did get right, he quite often in the press would talk about fixtures piling up and not having a squad big enough to manage all the games that would play. But I think by my reckoning from the last Vassas tie that we played at home, we played 9 games in just over 4 weeks, and it was 2 games and some every week, including we'd started that titanic struggle against Derby County in the League Cup. We'd already played the first leg of that at Derby, and a 2-each draw. John Lathan had scored 2 goals, and I think, everybody was hopeful that was going to be him hitting his straps and coming into things for us. He always had I always thought he had a lot of potential, John Lathan. The game itself, there looked to be about 30,000 in the ground. I'm sure Ron Linney and the directors would be happy that we were going to get colour TV out of all that money they were waiting, where they were getting off with. Round about 30,000, I felt, at the start of the game. It was raucous. The crowd were up for it. Great atmosphere before the game. Typical Roker Park midweek under the floodlights kind of night. It was a cracking atmosphere in the ground before the game. Stoker obviously had lined the boys up to get absolutely ripped in right from the start. We went for the jugular in this game, and there were great chances in the first couple of minutes. That I remember a Dennis Stewart cross that Billy Hughes just missed. A great cross from Bobby Kerr, who had a great game on the night. If that lad had been struggling with a heavy cold, he should get one every week. I remember folks saying, because what a game Bobby had that night. He was fantastic. With the ball and without it, he was a great lad. He used to do this thing. He would pop up in our box with a touch or a tackle or almost getting in the road of a player that was he had a great knack for defensive work as well as attack. Mickey Horswell, Ian Porterfield continued his form from the Vassas game. He was strutting and strolling about the place, laying off passes. He was a cracking player in the in that kind of on that kind of platform, because they were. It's funny to see it because they didn't really show a lot in attack, but they were really clever with the ball, working it out of defence and into midfield. You could tell there was whoa, this lot, they can play a bit, this lot, but they didn't really push on. It felt like they'd come with a strategy just to, not necessarily to park the bus, but they weren't really that adventurous, especially in the first half. But I have to say, we really did batter them. We really did go at them every time we had the ball. Mickey Horswell got put through by Porterfield, cracking shooting position, and Horswell did what he usually did in that situation, which was bleezed it round the post. He used to get himself into some great positions, but you were used to the ball fizzing over the bar around the post. And then their star player, and what a lad this is. We might speak about him a little bit more. Yazalde, the Argentinian international, a real goal scorer and a real threat. And having had all the pressure just about, they broke away and he scored. And it was a bloody good goal. They were up the pitch and had the ball in the back of the net before you could say Dickie Boo. Thankfully it was given offside, but it was a bit of in the full end where I watched that game, it was a huge size of relief, and you think, no, bloody hell, we'll have to watch this lot on the break, Geez, they were up the pitch in a flash, The offside goal, one of the things that we weren't all that used to, apart from, Leeds used to do a lot of this, but you'll remember in the Vassas game, there was controversy about a penalty, and the Vassas team seemed to spend ages and ages haranguing the referee, and they couldn't get the game going again. You're standing watching that thinking, stop yapping, get on with a bloody game, man. and it was such an unattractive trait at the time. We just weren't really used to that, the goal being given offside. Just the only player at one point that wasn't around the ref was the goalkeeper, the captain, Damas, was the goalkeeper and international goalkeeper, him. And the whole of the sporting team, it took ages to get the game going again, and you're thinking, such a bloody unattractive thing that, and do you get those minutes back? At the time, you didn't, you didn't really feel that the referees added any time on for that kind of thing. And then the ref incurs, a French referee, incurs the wrath of the Roker crowd. So we watch minutes of this yapping at the referee. The very next bit of the game, he awards a free kick, and Ian Porterfield puts his hands out and sort of cocks his head at him, and the ref booked him. And I was like, even now I can see it now thinking, for Christ's sake, are you kidding me, And I mean, Porterfield getting booked, it hardly ever happened, you just, you'd have to think that he must have smirked at him or something, because he was usually a pretty calm, cool character, Porterfield, it infuriated me. But anyway, it seemed to aggravate Porterfield a bit because he started sparking balls left, right, and centre, and he pinged a Borry pass to Dave Watson. Dave Watson used to love a gallop forward, and he played the ball out. I'm going to say it to Joe Bolton. Joe Bolton slips it to Porterfield, but Watson keeps running, and Porterfield slips the ball back into Davy Watson, and what a bloody crack he gave it. Middle of the park. I was up. I thought it was in, and Damas, the sporting keeper, it actually looked like it was just going to dip underneath him, but he did save it. But it was a cracking sort of moment in the game. He was great at that, Davy Watson. Great at charging forward like that. Loads and loads of pressure. It totally ramped up the crowd. The two, it's like symbiosis, isn't it? The team go for it, the crowd go for it. The crowd's going for it, so the team go for it. It was just one of them nights, lads. It was cracking atmosphere, and who's responding to who? There, I think it's a bit of both going on there. It's a symbiosis, as I say. I love it when it's like that. Anyway, we do. There's a great ball from Bobby Kerr. He splits the defence. Billy Hughes charging through. He was such a cavalier, Hughes, when he got going. He comes charging through on that Kerr ball, in on goal, hits it first time. Again, you're thinking, we're in here. This is a goal. And Damas just gets his fingertip to it and puts it over the bar. I didn't think we could get any more excited, We're really, really going for it. And you just felt a goal was coming. And it did come. David Young played a ball out to Vic Hallam. He nuts it. He's standing with his back to goal. He kind of cleverly sort of nuts it to the right-hand side. Bobby Kerr's on the edge of the box, and it was the weirdest thing. He sort of, I don't know whether he stumbled or he couldn't make his mind up whether to shoot. If he did it on purpose, it was dead clever, but I wouldn't put it past him because he sort of held off with the shot. And it was like the keeper moved to his right, anticipating that he was just going to hit it. But he didn't. He sort of hesitated. And then when he did hit it, he blasted it right at Damas, And it was like he couldn't sort his feet out. And he sort of turned. He caught the ball, but turned and took the ball over the line. It was the weirdest goal. But I tell you, straight away, the line on the ref gave it. They had little doubt. Of course, this triggered all the sporting team again were up in arms about it. And Damas, as the the captain, even after the game, he said it wasn't a goal, and that he hadn't taken the ball over. But sometimes I think when you're in that position, you're the worst person to judge when you're right on top of the line and that. But so the ref gives the goal, the crowd going nuts. The sporting players are going nuts. Bobby's running up the line. It's man. It was just a brilliant sort of moment for the game. But we deserved a goal. We deserved the lead for sure. And we almost scored again. I mean, they seemed in disarray after the goal. It seemed like to be a team of, I mean, there was in that team, apart from Yzalde, the Argentinian international, the rest of the team were all internationals. They're Brazilian and a couple of Brazilian internationals and Portuguese internationals who were a very experienced team, but where tails were well up. And we'll put them under a lot of pressure going into half time. Absolutely raucous applause for the team going off the pitch. There'd been a cracking 45 minutes of football. The only I remember talking to my mates at half time and just feeling like we've had about 5 or 6 really good chances there, and we've just put one of them away. And this lot looked like they could break and come back out where, what was Bob Dogo going to do in the second half? Was he going to keep us at it? Was he going to have what we hold? There was a right good debate went on at half time about that, But back we came. Second half started. There was a lad, Joe Bolton, had gotten himself booked in the first half, unusually for Joe. But he was kind of in direct opposition to a lad called Fagarito, and he was a bloody good player, that lad. Him and Yzalde were Sporting's 2 best players on the night. He was a really, really good player. And I tell you what, he rode some of Joe's tackles really well as well, because Joe humped him a couple of times, put him to the deck in what you might describe as hard but fair tackles. But they ended up, the 2 of them got booked at one point. And he had a great shot to start the second half. I thought that one was in. It wasn't. But back we came. And the second goal on the hour, Bobby Kerr did really well on the right-hand side. Rode a challenge, took the ball to the touchline and fizzed this cross over. And Mickey Horswell unusually charging in at the back post. I can always remember the one of the newspaper reports the next day, which I looked for, but I couldn't, because I thought there were a few good sort of lines in it, but I couldn't find it. But described him as rising majestically to the cross and putting it in the back of the net. Now, I thought that was a bit of artistic license for me, because to me, he just charged in and the ball seemed to hit him, and it went in at a tight angle. And when it hit him, Damash, the keeper, absolutely knocked him flat on his back. It was a hell of a dunt he gave him as the 2 of them collided. And the dunt was right, because Horswell after the game, when he was interviewed about the goal, he said he didn't know he'd scored, and that he kind of came to in the dressing room after the game, no idea that he'd scored. So it would be good to get his take on that. We could do with getting Mickey Horswell on one of the pods, I think, and asking him about that. It was a strange one. And to think that he's gone nearly a half of 45 minutes of football, 40 minutes of football, concussed, by all accounts. We keep pushing forward, and at 2-0, you are wondering about that, and I'm not saying this in hindsight. There was, amongst me and my mates, when we weren't roaring and shouting, and there was a great support from the Roker Park crowd that night, loads and loads of noise coming down from the stands. But we were kind of having a bit of a debate about what, sake, just we don't need every, at one point, I think every one of our outfield players was in their half, and you think, oh, Christ, how are you, man? 2-0, let's hold it there, but we keep on going, and there was a Dennis Stewart scored a goal that was given offside, and I without the benefit of playback and VAR and what have you, your guess as good as mine about who was offside there. And Billy Hughes clipped the ball with a header, so we could have easily. If I say to you that we had 12 good chances in that game, 12 very good chances, and scored 2 of them. Billy Hughes clips the ball, Dennis Stewart scores, offside goal, and then in the last 5 minutes, we're still attacking, we're up the pitch, and they break away, and they had a little winger called Chico, and he was a flyer. He was one of the flyers. He hadn't done much in the game, but you'd seen his pace in the first half in that one break that they had, and he broke away up the left wing and put a cross right into that. I love to call it that corridor of uncertainty. Does the keeper come out and get it? He's turned the defenders a little bit who were standing watching it, and Yazalde just come absolutely between the 2 defenders and nuts the ball into the back of the net on round about 85 minutes. But it felt a right sucker punch, you just felt we've had all of that bloody game. They've hardly been up the park, and there you go, 2-1. There was a bit of nonsense at the end of the game. I think Bob Stoker got his little black book out and was marking the name of one of the sporting coaches who jumped in front of the dugout at the end of the game and was given at the biggin. And they clearly thought that, their European experience, they obviously knew we've got that goal and that's the tie. We'll get you back at our place. It was a tough one to take. They'd shown quite a bit of skill. I'm not going to say to you that you couldn't see that they were a good team, but they'd hardly put one goal. Monty had little or nought to do in the goal. Would kept them at a right distance. But it was I can't say anything else to you. But it was a fantastic game to be at, and crowd, team going for it. Damash after the game, he said it wasn't a goal, and that late goal, he was very happy about the late goal, and would get you, basically will get you at our place kind of thing. The manager, he was a guy called Mario Lino, and he said, we can turn the tables in our own country if our supporters give us the same encouragement Sunderland's did tonight. And he was tipping his hat at the support there, who were brilliant on the night. Bobby Kerr, he reckoned we still had a chance after the game. He thought that Sporting Lisbon would have to come out and play, and he thought that might suit us. Proud of the team on the night. That was the most overwhelming feeling. But sucker punched by the late goal was what I felt a bit. There were some other results on the night, and I know we're speaking about this with regards to the Vassas game, but in the Cup Winners' Cup, Borussia beat Rangers 3-0 in front of 30,000. In the UEFA Cup, Aberdeen and Spurs played, and won 30,000. Ipswich beat Lazio 4-0 on the night in front of 20,000. 20,000, and Leeds and Hibs played that night. Now, remember, one of the things about living in Morpeth, where we used to be right on the A1 route, and I can always remember the Hibs fans coming through and stopping in Morpeth on the way to the game. The pubs did well out of that crew on their way. And Wolves got humped at Leipzig 3-0. But Celtic were playing at home in the European Cup. They took a 0-each draw against a team that I cannot even pronounce and can't remember. But there was just 30,000. I'm saying there was 30,000 at that game. Liverpool got beat 2-1 in Belgrade off Red Star, and that was the biggest crowd of the night. There was 40,000 in Belgrade. We had the biggest European crowd that night of 31,000 and a few hundred. It was cracking. I look back on that game with a lot of pride. I think was one of the things I felt, not just for the team, but I thought as a support, we really put ourselves out there, and we were at it, the team were at it from start to finish. We just showed a little bit of inexperience. We probably should have shut the game down at 2-0. So, that was where the last European night to be played on a Sunderland pitch, the last competitive European night. Obviously we needed to go and play the away tie, but we also had this Derby County League Cup marathon we were in the middle of, as well as trying to fight our way out of a pretty competitive second division at that point, and the games were piling up, and Bob Stoker was getting a bit touchy about the fixture pile up in his squad. Did just want to mention the lad that scored their goal, Yazaldi, if I can beg your indulgence on this lad. What a character this boy is. He was the Golden Boot winner that season for Sporting. He won the Golden Boot in 73-74. He scored 46 goals in 29 games for Sporting. That's a canny kick at the ball, that like. And what a lad. We won a brand new Toyota car for winning the Golden Boot, and he sold it and split the proceeds amongst his teammates, which I thought was a lovely touch. He scored a lot of goals the next season as well. But the thing that was really interesting about Yazaldi, or Churlo, was what he was known as in Argentina. That was his nickname. He'd been the Argentinian Footballer of the Year in 1970. He played for Argentina in the 74 World Cup and scored 2 goals for them. But he'd actually started playing football almost by accident. He went with a friend to a training session. He really just went along to accompany his friend, who was going this. It was almost like reserves, not even second team, third team training at a minor club called Piranha, and he jumped into the game and just started playing and made such a hit that they signed him in 1962. He'd literally done nothing before that and just rolled in and played this game. I mean, what are the chances? Independiente signed him from Piranha. He scored loads of goals for them. He goes to Sporting, and his record at Sporting, if you wanted to look that up, it looks like he plays 104 games and scores 104 goals for Sporting. It's absolutely astounding record. He plays at Marseille. he then, in 1973, he becomes the posh and beck of the Mediterranean football playing countries because he marries a very famous Portuguese model and actress who's went by the nickname of Carmen, but she used to act under the actress's name of Britt Nichols. And I know that my worthy colleague Andrew looked Britt up and had a very nice time finding out all about Britt and her career. It's suffice to say that she enjoyed some fairly raunchy roles. Did Britt, but there is a sad ending, really, to this. I mean, Posh and Becks was the analogy, but the Argentina had the World Cup in 1978 and famously won it. And the head of the Argentinian FA persuaded Izalde to come back to Argentina. It was one of the reasons why he didn't have as many Argentinian caps as perhaps he should have. He only ever got 10 and scored 2 goals, but it was because he played out with the country. And they used to have a pretty dim view of that, at least play in South America if you're going to play out with the country. So they didn't always look upon that favourably. But the head of the Argentinian FA had spoken to Izalde and promised him that if he came back to Argentina, he would get his place in the squad for the World Cup in 78. So Izalde packs up Carmen, his wife, and goes back to Argentina, signs for Newell's Old Boys, and isn't picked in the squad. And unfortunately, it triggers a really deep depression, which cuts across him really, really badly. He struggles with this for the rest of his life. Really, his marriage, after about 13, 14 years, collapses. And he dies at the age of 51 of brain hemorrhage and heart failure. So a sad ending for this lad, and a sad ending for a lad that he took his goal really, really well on that night, and you'll hopefully hear from the secondary play the influence he had over that, lads. You never know what you're watching there. There's stories all over the place that night. You never know what's going on in front of your eyes on the football pitch. There you go, though. That was Sunderland in their last ever European tie.
Do I get a right of reply, Kelvin? For
I think you deserve one, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, you know me, lads. I'm just all I'm bothered about is Sunderland history. And I heard there was a connection to the club, connection to Sunderland's European campaign, and I thought, for the purposes of the pod, I'll do a bit more reading, and that's all it was. So, Kelvin,
Andrew, you're such a pro, Andrew. You're a role model.
Well, exactly. One thing I'll just say there, and Kelvin, I'm loving these European updates you're doing. Some of the little details you're coming up with are fascinating. I hadn't realised until you said that the legs had been switched, the order had been switched, and as you say, we'll come in time to mention how the goal impacted things. But really, the fact that we weren't at Roker for the second leg, I think has a huge impact on things because, as we'll discuss, no doubt, we saw a lot of the dark arts in the return leg, and they might not have been as applicable had that game been the first leg. So, yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelvin, for sharing that. We will take a short break, and we'll be back very soon.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
Welcome back to How We're the podcast, and you are joining us for another episode of On This Week. We've just heard all about Sunderland's tie with Sporting Lisbon back on the 24th of October 1973, and we are moving on to October the 25th. Now, 1890, Johnny Campbell scored the first ever league hat-trick for Sunderland. We beat Bolton Wanderers 5-2. I think it was Pikes Road was their former ground, something like that. It was Pikes something or other. Playing them away from home, obviously. Johnny Campbell actually scored 4 goals. This was our first season of proper league football, being part of the Football League. So, yes, it was a nice victory. We came back from 2-1 down at half-time, only our 7th ever league game. 1930, Jimmy Thorpe, goalkeeper born in Jarrow, made his league debut in a 4-2 win over Huddersfield Town. 1997, Darren Holloway made his debut. Sunderland beat Stoke 2-1. Down at their place, Lee Clark got 2 goals for us. And Paul Stewart, who had been at the club the season before, got Stoke's goal. 2004, we beat Rotherham away 1-0. I think it was at Millmore, one of the last seasons. Rotherham had a Millmore. Although I think the ground's still standing, isn't it? The last time I drove past, it's all still there. It's a bit of a funny thing when you drive past it. But that was the game. Danny Collins made his debut for Sunderland. He came on as sub for Darren Carter, who was on loan from Birmingham. In the Rotherham side that day were Michael Proctor and John Mullen. Mike Pollitt, who was a goalkeeper on Sunderland's books but never actually played for us, was in goal for Rotherham. And Robbie Stockdale, who was assistant manager for a spell and caretaker manager, was in the Rotherham lineup that day as well. Now, last week we talked about a Wigan game where there was 5 former Sunderland players in the lineup. We did have a question saying that somebody thought it was 6. When we've looked into it, it's not. Somebody thought Jordan Jones was also playing that game. Jordan Jones played the game before, the season before, but he wasn't actually playing in this game. There was a lad called Jamie Jones on the bench, and there was Jordan somebody or other on the bench as well, which may be where the confusion arises. But on October the 25th in 2005, Kelvin's got a call. It's Carmen.
She stood outside a Doncaster nightclub saying, where are you, Kelvin? I thought we were meeting.
I've got your Cosmopolitan lined up for you.
I thought I'd switched that off. Me and technology, lad.
Not now, Carmen. I'm busy, love. Go back to October the 25th, 2005. We played Arsenal in a League Cup game. We got absolutely stuffed 3-0. And it was a very young Arsenal side. In that side were 4 future Sunderland players, and 1 former Sunderland player was on the bench for them. I will caveat, 2005 Arsenal League Cup, Stadium Light, it got beat 3-0. I will caveat it. One of the future Sunderland players, I'm using that in the loosest term possible.
For the Arsenal one, did you say there was an unused player on the bench?
One unused sub who was a former Sunderland player.
Could I go rogue and suggest Mark Poom?
You are correct.
Oh, I'm having that.
Ooh.
And I'll say Justin Hoyt.
Interestingly, Justin Hoyt was in the Sunderland side that night.
Oh, of course.
Playing against his parent club, which you wouldn't see too often these days.
Was the player...
Anthony Stokes wasn't one of them, was
Anthony
he?
Stokes was one player, yes.
Well, you said one of them technically was a Sunderland player. Was that a Boué?
Correct.
Disappointed with the Justin Hoyt one, but I'm happy with the other two. I might just sit back now and leave it while I'm ahead.
God, Carmen's got you firing the day, mind.
I refer to her as Brit, not Carmen. She has to call her Brit.
Seb Larsson and Nicholas Bentner were the other two players in the Arsenal team that day. 2008, we beat Newcastle at home for the first time in almost 3 decades. Jibril Cissé and a fantastically good free kick from Kieran Richards past Shea Given gave us the victory. And 7 years later, we played Newcastle at home again in Sam Allardyce and won 3-0 on that occasion. Now, in 1978, on the 25th of October, Jimmy Adamson resigned to take over at Leeds United, Andrew.
Yes, I feel a bit of a fraud talking about this subject, given that Kelvin actually was there firsthand. So just as and when I invariably make a mistake, just chip in here, please, Kelvin.
Okay, Brett.
I'm worried that this pod is going to go down another
rapidly.
Yeah. As I say, Kelvin fortunately or unfortunately lived through this period, but it is always a period that's intrigued me because I've got a lot of questions. We've spoken about Adamson before, the David Snowden book that Chris did a really good pod with the author of a couple of months ago. I read that book. I was fascinated by it. As I say, I've got loads of queries still. You've got Adamson, who was a localish character. I think it was Northumberland he was from. Did he might have even supported the club or had a soft spot for the club as a youngster. He had a talented squad, a lot of young, exciting players in that team. Before we were relegated in that famous 76-77 season, he had us playing brilliantly. He'd come in with the club at rock bottom and was a hair's width from pulling off an amazing escape, an amazing relegation survival act. So he had all of these things going for him. And yet in Division 2, just things never quite fired. And there was always this reputation of him upsetting players or upsetting fans. He could rub people up the wrong way. So there was always that fascination around him. And yet then on this day when he leaves, and he left, he wasn't sacked, as far as I understand, which is very rare for a Sunderland manager. Often they are peddled, whereas in effect he was poached. Despite all of this baggage around him, he gets an absolutely fantastic job in the top division with Leeds United, who are still one of the biggest clubs at the time. So there you go. There's this funny relationship around Leeds United, which had lasted maybe 15, 20 years. There'd been the rivalry, there'd been the cup final, there'd been the leg break. Was it, his name's completely gone.
Collins.
Yes. There'd been all sorts of issues with Reevy in the past. So you'd think Sunderland fans might be a bit upset that they'd come along and swiped our manager, but probably a lot of Sunderland fans were actually quite relieved. Would you go along that line of thought, Kelvin? Is that a fair understanding of it?
I would never pretend that I'm speaking for every Sunderland fan at that time. Andrew, but he did have a bit of a Marmite kind of relationship with the fans. I thought had made an error in criticising the fans and criticising their support, which I thought was he could have. I could sort of see what he was trying to say when he did that, but he got the wrong side of the majority of fans by criticising them and comparing them to other teams' support. That was an error. He was clearly embarked on a process of getting rid of the 1973 squad, which I think that was just unfortunate. Some of them maybe it was time for them to move on, but that kind of was put on him, that he started getting rid of these players probably too soon for some of them. There was some odd question marks about one or two of them that you thought, why is he doing that? And it just felt like he just wanted them. He wanted Bob Stokoe's team out of the door and his own team in, which I kind of get that a bit. But there was another side to him, I think I've said before on this pod, I always felt conflicted about Jimmy Adamson when he was our manager, in that some of the time I could really see what he was trying to do, and he was responsible for that. There was a marvelous coming together. You might call it a happenstance of what they called, I think they called them Charlie's Angels, which was a TV program at the time, but Gary Rail, Kevin Arnott and Sean Elliott came into the team, but it was Adamson that pushed them forward. Rail had already played a little bit, but Arnott and Elliott came in alongside Rail. Alan Brown, who were mentioned before, started figuring a little bit, and I'm sure Mickey Henderson as well came in. And the other player that he brought to the club, this lad was brilliant for us, was Mick Doherty, Tommy Doherty's son. What a fantastic leader on the pitch this lad was, and never let the team down, Mick Doherty. So you could sort of see sometimes what he was driving at and where he was trying to get to with the team. This mix of experience and youth was what he was driving at, and a team game that I always felt that he was one of those managers, a little bit like the lad we've got now, who he had his preferred way of playing, but he would set his teams up. He would look at who he was playing and set his teams up a little bit, to counter those teams. It didn't always work out, but I just thought he was quite I always, in some of this, I don't know whether it's looking back on it, but I remember even feeling a little bit at the time, he seemed to me to be a great coach with players. But would he have been better suited to just being on the training ground and not getting involved in all the managerial, the other stuff that was around there? I don't know whether you're going to mention it as well, but his family never moved from Burnley. His wife and
Well,
I'll let you mention that then. Yeah.
No, that's interesting, Kelvin, because that is something that comes up in some of the press releases that I'm going to run us through in a moment. Very interesting comment there about, was he perhaps a better bet just purely as a coach rather than a manager? I believe he was very highly respected for his methods on the training pitch. I believe he was forward thinking. The other thing you've set me up beautifully for, it's ironic that he did have a part in splitting up the 73 team, whether that was his intention or just the circumstances is up for debate. Because on the night of Adamson going is Ian Porterfield's testimonial at Roker Park, where a lot of those players who have moved on are all then coming back to join up. So you've got this fascinating kind of blast from the past on the very day
you couldn't have planned it, could you?
No, exactly. It's a beautiful little quirk. Now, I'm going to run through some quotes here. Officially speaking, they were from the Hartlepool Daily Mail on the day of Adamson leaving. But I believe the Daily Mail was, at that point, the sister paper of the Sunderland Echo. So this is pretty much what Argus will have been saying in the Echo and using the same quotes again. So here we go. Leeds United today appointed their third manager of the year when they took Jimmy Adamson from Sunderland. So took there again, like I'm saying, it's very rare for a Sunderland manager to be leaving his post for something, quote, better, and not because he's got to join the dole queue because he's being kicked out. Now, here we go. Adamson reported to have been ill at his Burnley home for the last few days, was at Elland Road this morning, half an hour before a board meeting that was due to start. The announcement that he had been offered and taken the post was made soon after at 11 a.m. Adamson, in charge at Roker for 2 years after taking over from Bob Stokoe, was not on contract with the second division club. Now, that might be quite interesting as well. That might have added to some of the doubts around Adamson. And as Kelvin has said, maybe the disgruntlement that his family hadn't moved up to the Northeast region. Going back to this article now, Adamson has had to shoulder his share of criticism since taking the Sunderland job, though the once popular Adamson out might be popular but not easy to say. Adamson out campaign seems to have gone quiet this season, so maybe a couple of people have softened in their attitude towards it. He took over halfway through the relegation season and last season failed to take the side back up, though there were hopes that they could do it this season. He left behind a bemused Roker Park, where he was expected tonight for Ian Porterfield's testimonial game. Deputy manager Dave Merrington was left in charge, but as soon as the Leeds news was announced, speculation began that Merrington and one or two other backroom boys could follow their manager to Elland Road. Now, I do know that Adamson upset a few people because he brought in his men when he took over. There was famously a lot of unhappiness that he brought in a commercial manager from Burnley who came to Sunderland and upset the Supporters Association because they had been running the club shop and been doing a lot of the events on behalf of Sunderland, whereas this bloke seemed to kind of edge them out. Admittedly, it was a time when football was becoming more professional, but that was another thing to another stick to hit Adamson with, that one of his men had come along and done a lot to spoil the relationship with the Supporters Association. And yeah, I know for a fact that when he left to Leeds over the coming weeks and months, he then did start poaching a lot of his men. Whenever a manager leaves, there's always straight away the questions about who's going to replace him. Inevitably, Brian Clough is linked. Laurie McMenemy is linked. You've also got Jack Charlton mentioned as being one of the favourites. That would have been an interesting one. Bob Moncur, who had played for us, but at that point was at Carlisle. His name was in the ring. So was Graham Taylor at Watford. Stan Anderson, who at the time was at Doncaster, and Len Ashurst of Newport. Now, obviously, a lot of them were former Sunderland connections, so they were always going to be in the mix, shall we say, in the bookies' odds. But the Jack Charlton one and the Graham Taylor one, both very well-known names. That that interested me because I didn't know they'd ever been linked to us. Going back to this article, Adamson has accepted a 3-year contract described as substantial and begins work immediately. Now, next to this article, there's an advert for a butcher's in Hartlepool selling family steak pie at the special introductory offer of 54 pence. So I don't know how many family steak pies a substantial contract would have got you, but that's the type of money we're looking at there. The Leeds chairman was actually away on business when all of this happened. I think Leeds had a few problems. Jock Stein had only been in there for a few weeks, hadn't he? He was a bit like Clough, and then he left. It was left to his boardroom, his board members, to bring Adamson in.
I was just going to say about Jock Stein. I seem to have this in my head. Somebody will put us right. I think he was only there for 44 days, which was the same number of days that Brian Clough did. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a bizarre and another bizarre quirk. But yeah, Manny Cousins was the chairman, but he'd left the Adamson appointment to his colleagues. There was a statement released by Leeds that went, "Permission to interview Mr. Adamson was kindly granted by the chairman of Sunderland Football Club." That always annoys me because it's Sunderland Association Football Club, but that's me just having a bee in me bonnet. And after discussions over several weeks, we are satisfied he has the experience and qualities required for the important task of managing Leeds United. Now, I don't know if that means they were having discussions with us for Adamson for a couple of weeks, and this had actually been in the pipeline for a while or not. I don't know. Yeah. Mr. Adamson will be commencing his duties today and will assume full responsibility for all football matters. He has been granted a 3-year contract commencing November 1st, and he will come to live in Leeds on or before July next year. So that jumped out at me, given some of the previous accusations. The Leeds board also said that Adamson, again, had been given a substantial contract. No figures were disclosed, but it is believed to be, believed to be in excess of 20,000 a year, which is a lot of steak pies. Adam said he had been suffering from gastroenteritis, but he had just been declared fit by his doctor. So, yeah, maybe had this been rumbling along for a few days and he's decided to throw a sickie in, just before moving on. Adamson himself emphasised, "I have been very happy at Sunderland," which is up for debate. "The directors there have been very good. They let me do the job my way, and they did not interfere one little bit. They have been tremendous. You always feel a little bit sad when you leave people like that. You get a pang in your heart. But at the same time, I am looking forward to this job at Leeds." And not once in that paragraph does he mention the support or the fans or the players. So, interesting.
Yeah.
Couple of little snippets in the press from the following day. It's going to be the second mention of Ron Linney, who was the secretary. So at that time, the secretary role was quite important, and they would often be the one that you would go to for quotes. He said that there'd been an emergency meeting of the board on the day of Adamson going, and that the directors are very disappointed to lose the services of Jimmy Adamson and are making every endeavour to fill the position of manager as soon as possible. So that then goes the other way and suggests that this was all very quick and had happened out of the blue. The other quote, or the other little snippet from the following day, was that Jimmy Adamson was at Roker Park late last night following the Ian Porterfield testimonial match. Long after the final whistle had been blown, Adamson was locked in his former office with a number of directors and senior Roker Park officials. He declined to comment on his move, apart from saying, "I have nothing further to add." So he was actually there on the night of the Porterfield testimonial, but had no involvement in it. His duties had officially ended by kickoff.
Yeah. It was Dave Merrington, I think, was in the dugout with Billy Elliott, if memory serves me well.
Well, Merrington and well, I think it was Elliott, wasn't it, that then eventually got given the reins until the end of the season. But Merrington was a very interesting character. He was very open and honest in the weeks that followed. He was quite happy to speak to the press, and there was no kind of, I think there was always an understanding that he would eventually go to Leeds at some point, but he did try to do his best in the meantime. There was a lot of conjecture and a lot of confusion as to who was going to take over. I refer to that book by David Snowden again, A Fistful of Doldrums, it's called, and it really does detail that era quite well. Have I got time to just touch upon the Porterfield testimonial, gents?
Yeah, of course.
Lovely, because I was going to touch on it whether we had time or not. I'll quickly go through this. On the night, as we've seen, Adamson is on the scene and he's locked away in the corridors, presumably thrashing through, I don't know, payoffs or whatever. Maybe he's already discussing which members of staff he can take with him. I don't know. The game that was taking place at this time was Ian Porterfield's testimonial, and it was between members of the current Sunderland squad and members of the 1973 squad. So as I say, that's a hugely ironic twist in all of this. The 73 team, by that point, had one or two players who had either retired or were by now playing like non-league or lower level football. I think you said, Kelvin, last week that Dick Malone almost used it as a...
He was the best player on the night, I think, Dick Malone.
Yeah.
He was playing at Hartlepool.
That's it. He used it as a trial almost because, if I remember rightly, didn't Bob Stokoe, who was back for the night, he ended up then signing Malone again because he'd seen him in this game and thought, oh, this lad's still got it. So yeah, despite the fact that Sunderland's 73 team, one or two of them were at the veteran stage, they actually won 5-3 on the night, which against a team of first-team professionals is really good. That said, I don't know if that was just if it was a bit of fun, because, you know, at some point you had Joe Bolton, your favourite, Kelvin. He went in goal. Now, Joe Bolton could have conceivably been part of the 73 squad because he was there at Wembley at the day and famously looked after all the players' false teeth on the touchline when they were playing. So at the end,
and their boots.
Yes, he did. He quote cleaned their boots before the game and might just have, by coincidence, made it look as if they were made by a different manufacturer for sponsorship reasons. Yeah, a couple of players ran towards Bolton at full time to get their false teeth out of his pocket so that they looked good when they went up to pick up their medals up the Wembley steps. So yeah, he played for the current team and ended up going in goal because Barry Siddle decided he fancied a little spell outfield and played up front for the end of the game. Siddle mustn't have been very popular because early on in the match, he went and saved an Ian Porterfield penalty, seemingly. So he was perhaps the pantomime villain on that day. I remember being at Kevin Ball's testimonial against Sampdoria, and the Sampdoria goalkeeper clearly didn't get the script because he saved Kevin Ball's penalty on his big day, which was not a very good idea. So yeah, maybe the 5-3 scoreline was a bit of fun and didn't really say too much about the current team. In the 73 squad was pretty much everybody you would expect. apart from sadly Dave Watson, who was there on was away on England international duty, so he couldn't be a part of it. But everybody else came together for Porterfield. Jimmy Montgomery didn't play, but he was there as part of the squad and on the bench. He was still playing top flight football, so maybe, I think he was at Birmingham City at that point, so maybe Birmingham weren't too keen on the idea of him playing in a testimonial. You would have thought Trevor Swinburne would have gone in goal, but he was injured at the time. So Derek Forster, who'd...
I'd forgotten that, actually.
He'd retired from professional football, but he played on the night. Also on the bench, you might know this name, Kelvin, a fella called Ray Blackhall, who was from Ashington. He was on the bench for the 73 Cup winners. I'm assuming it was because at the time he was playing for Sheffield Wednesday with Ian Porterfield. And I don't know if he maybe just fancied a trip back up to the northeast for the night, or maybe he was a Sunderland fan. So said to Porterfield, hey, listen, I wouldn't mind being involved in your big game, and just saying saying I'd been involved at Roker Park. So he'd played for Newcastle prior to signing for Sheff Wed, but I wonder if there was a nice little story there behind why he was asked along to be part of the 73 team. So yeah, that was it. It was a really intriguing night. You were there, I'm guessing, Kelvin, and a lot of familiar faces on the pitch, whilst in the background you've got all of the ramifications of Adamson going. And Adamson, to be fair to him, in that first season at Elland Road, he did canny well with them, because he got them to finish 5th in the top flight, and they qualified for Europe. When he eventually left Leeds, he didn't do anything else in the game. But for that first season, he did really well. And I reckon there will have been some fans that night around you at Roker Park watching that testimonial thinking, flipping heck, Adamson is going to be a disaster at Leeds. Then come the end of the season, they're scratching their head thinking, fair play, maybe he was better than we give him credit for. Who knows?
I can always remember his time at Leeds. He did do well for them, but remember he did that with us as well. It took him a while to get going with us, and then that second half of that first division season back in the first division, you were quite right, Andrew. It is still one of my favourite periods of watching Sunderland. We had some fantastic results, performances. And from looking dead and buried at Christmas time, it was the last game. He took that to the last game of the season with some clever use of his squad, and one or two goodbyes. McDougherty definitely was one of them. So it is one of my favourite periods of watching Sunderland. And he had some responsibility for that period. But the second season, he lost his way, and some of that, in hindsight, when you look at what was happening, his family never moved to Sunderland, and they never moved to Leeds either. They stayed in the Burnley area. His wife was quite unwell, and they never moved, and he never moved. And he had a really, really terrible... He jumped out of the frying pan into the fire because the Leeds fans and some of their players never really took to him. And I always remember, I'm pretty sure about this, but again, somebody can put me right if they want to. I'm sure he took a libel action when he eventually walked away from Leeds. I'm sure he was sacked. When he was sacked, Alan Clark got the job, and Clark said some quite unkind things about the state of the players. And Adamson, being the kind of character he was, threatened a libel action. against Clark for that, and that was settled out of court.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure in Adamson's favour. Obviously, Clark didn't want to go there with that, but he was. Again, it's people's stories. We said this about Yazalde there. What's going on behind the scenes? We only know. We don't know the half of it, and when you sort of take up his story from a personal or family perspective, you do get a different kind of angle on it, and a feel for him, really, that he was dealing with a hell of a lot. But he walked away from Leeds and he never did another thing in football.
That backs up the suggestion that there was maybe ill health with his wife and he'd perhaps fallen out of football and had more important things to focus on. One thing I would love to have got to the bottom of, you've talked about there that fantastic run of form, and he came so close to saving us on that infamous night at Everton. I would love to know the reasons as to why Tony Towers didn't play in that game, because I think that was a major factor in us going down and might have been one of those first things that got some of the other players back. So perhaps I'm putting two together and might be getting five, and I might be way offline.
If you look at his history,
I'd love to know the story.
You look at his history at Leeds as well. The more experienced the player, the more chance there was of a bit of friction between him and the player. He did seem to butt heads a bit with Towers, but Towers wasn't shy. He was quite a voluble kind of character himself, Tony Towers. Yeah. Great player. I loved watching him, but because he brought Bobby Kerr back in for that game, didn't he?
Who, ironically, he then had a long-term, I don't know if you just call it a clash of personalities, but Adamson and Kerr for a long time had issues, and Kerr was on the transfer list for a long time.
Yeah.
Kerr was one of the more influential figures.
Yeah. It was a funny old period, but I have to say I look back on the 76, 77, the second half of that season as one of my favourite periods of watching. So it was really, really exciting, on par with the two Reedy years, for sustained kind of performance after performance coming in. You couldn't leave it alone. I think I went to every game from about, early February onwards. I was just about at every game, home and away. I wasn't the only one. There was loads of us just totally hooked by it. Could we do it? And we nearly did. He was. I could sometimes see what he was trying to do. I did feel a bit. I definitely wasn't in the Adamson out campaign.
But you did call up a radio station to vouch for him, so there we go. We will move on to the last day of the week, October the 26th, 1929. Now, we talked about Yazalde's goal-scoring record of 101 and 101, and in 1929, Dave Halliday, another fellow with an exceptionally good goal-scoring record, was transferred to Arsenal for £6,500. He scored 162 goals in 175 first-team games for the club, which is some impressive stuff. 1935, another great striker, H. Carter, scored 2 as we beat Sheffield Wednesday 5-1 at home. And in 1946, we beat Manchester United away 3-0. Cliff Whitlam scored a hat-trick, but Manchester United were playing at Main Road. This is when we did our Manchester United podcast of games gone by away at Manchester United. We failed to mention the away games when they actually played at Main Road rather than Old Trafford, Kelvin. And this was one. Old Trafford had been closed for quite a while for bomb damage during the war, so they had to borrow their neighbour's stadium. 1960 marks the occasion of our first ever League Cup tie. This was a newly created competition to add some more fixtures into the calendar, and we were drawn away at Brentford. We were winning 3-1 at half-time, but we came out with a 4-3 defeat in the end. 1991, we talked earlier, John Burns signed, and on this day, 26th of October, he made his debut against Bristol Rovers in a 1-1 draw. And in 1993, this is one of those folklore games. Sunderland played Aston Villa. And you look at the scoreline, Sunderland won, Aston Villa 4. We were second division. They were first of our Premier League at the time. And you think, the Premier League club came in, turned us over and waltzed back out. But whether Mark Bosnich's goalkeeping display was as good as I remember it from my position in the Fulwell end, and as folklore has it, I don't know. But he seemed to save everything like that. We were fantastic, and we absolutely pelted their goal, and he pulled off save after save after save, and produced probably the best goalkeeping display from an opposition keeper I think I've seen.
It was what a fantastic performance, both from him and the team that night. It was a really, really odd game that I scuttled off back over the border after the game. I was shaking my head all the way off, thinking, how the hell did that happen? 4-1. And I think they went up the pitch. I think they had 5, possibly 6. I think Chamberlain made a couple of saves. That they had 6 chances and put 4 of them away, didn't they? Yeah. But Bosnich, what the
unbelievable!
He was just stopping everything.
Unbelievable.
And he do you remember I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it Martin Gray? I always really liked him, Martin Gray. He was gritty, hard kind of player. And Martin Gray went into a challenge with him, and he kind of sort of dropped to the ground and then jumped up and was, going to be sparring with Gray, and the ref had to come in. Gray just turned round and jogged away, and then he dropped to the ground again. The crowd were like going at him, and I'm sure at the end of the game, when he was asked about his performance, I seem to remember on the telly watching the highlights, and he said that he'd never played at Roker Park before, and that he'd been really impressed with the support who'd spent from that moment. Like he turned into the Panto. We loved the Panto of Villanus, didn't we? We were like, every time he touched the ball, he went, you bloody go on, you Aussie bugger, and he was getting pelters from the crowd. But some of that, I think, was just what a performance he put up that night. We could have won that game 10-4. There were some fantastic saves. Brilliant game. They had some team, Villa, as well. When you think, I was just, as you were talking there, Martin, I'm thinking, I started thinking about who was all playing for Villa that night. That had a roll call of cracking players. But Dalian Atkinson that night showed what he was about. He was really, really good that night. I always remember Paul McGrath playing as well. I always really liked him as a player. But you mentioned him earlier, didn't you, Jamie Lawrence? He came on, didn't he, that game? Yep. Did he not? He made a mistake, didn't he, for the fourth goal? He could have he was reaching for it, and instead of clearing it, he sort of nudged it into Ray Houghton's path. Ray Houghton had just come on as sub.
That's right.
And he nudged it into Ray Houghton's path, and he scored the fourth goal, didn't he?
Houghton got the third goal for Villa.
Third goal.
Yeah, Dalian Atkinson opened the scoring, and he got one in the last minute as well. A former Sunderland coach and very temporary caretaker manager got Aston Villa's second, Kevin Richardson. Still great pull one back for us just after half time. But yeah, Ray Houghton and Dalian Atkinson sealed the win. This was a game that I think legend has it, Ron Atkinson offered Terry Butcher £1 million for Martin Smith. after watching him play.
Yeah.
You just wanted to take him.
Yeah.
It's a shame Chris isn't
said-
here. I think Chris has gone through the details of that story before. It's an interesting one because Martin Smith could very easily have done well in the Premier League.
Well, if you're looking at purely on
absolutely.
football terms, you can't say that would have been the right time for him to make a step up and go and do it and play for a club like Villa, because he could have flourished.
Just a couple of points on this game. Like you, Martin, I wonder if Bosnich's performance was as good as I remember it. So I've deliberately not watched the highlights because I don't want that story to change. But certainly you were in the full while I was in the clock stand that last night. I recall people around me who'd been watching football a lot longer being incredulous at how good he was. So yeah, it must have been as good as we remember it. Kelvin mentioned there that Bosnich was almost kind of fans begrudgingly liking him on that night because of how well he played. He certainly wasn't popular when we played them when we went up into the Premier League. Do you remember? He'd just been involved in hadn't he done some sort of horrific Nazi gesture as a supposed joke that went down
with Spurs, wasn't it?
Yeah, it went down. Was it at Spurs? Was it right? Okay.
That was the thing.
Yeah, it went down like a lead balloon, and Aston Villa just so happened to be coming up to Sunderland the week after or whatever. He got absolute dog's abuse that day.
Well, you've given me a very seamless link there, because exactly on the same day, 3 years later, in 1996, Bosnich came up with Villa. We were obviously playing them in the Premier League, and he saved a first half penalty from David Kelly. Paul Stewart put the rebound in, but he went off injured after 57 minutes. So yeah, he disappeared. He disappeared just short of the hour, and that was the same game that Lionel Perez made his full debut, because the previous week at Southampton, Tony Courton had got his injury and Perez had come off.
I believe then. Go on, Kelvin.
I was just going to say, just jumping back to the something else that popped into my head was Ron Atkinson, the Villa manager. Whatever you think about Ron, he was always entertaining in his television interviews, and he I remember laughing my head off at him because the commentator asked him first of all what he thought of Bosnich's display, and he looks him in the eye and he says, "I thought he could have caught a few more of them." And then he said, "What about the game itself?" He says, "It was never in doubt. There was only one team in it, and they lost the game." He was always good for a quip, Ron Atkinson, wasn't he?
Well, that got him into bother as well. A bit like Bosnich, he ended up crossing the mark. I'm just, if I may, just going to run through two memories, just because whenever we talk about this era, it transforms me back to being a daft teenage lad. The Premier League game against Aston Villa, I think that was the day when the newspapers were giving fans, do you remember those inflatable sticks that had a craze for about a month, where everybody got these two sticks?
In half and
it was like a soccer sausage, I think it was called, and you banged them against each other to make this horrible racket. I think that was around the time of Bosnich playing in the Premier League. And just because you mentioned Martin Gray, he was a good player. I remember he was a decent player for us. He will always make me smile because we were at a reserve game once at Roker Park, and one of my mates was casually leaning up against that, that tunnel, which looked more like it was made out of conservatory roof material. He was leaning up against that, chatting on, trying to look cool. Martin Gray crept along the tunnel, spotted my mate, so threw a ball off the glass, where my mate was stood, and he jumped out of his skin. He must have jumped about 20 foot in the air, and Martin Gray just ran off, chuckling away to himself because he'd got this poor teenage lad. He'd shocked the life out of him. So yeah, that was a story I always think of whenever Martin Gray gets mentioned.
Excellent. Well, I think that will do us for this week. We've gone through an awful lot there over the course of a couple of hours of events that took place between 20th and 26th of October. Now, Andrew, do you have a quiz to leave the listeners with for next week? And
Yes.
me. It kept me guessing all week, so,
Yes.
something for me to
And
ponder on.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one, and who knows, next week's episode I might actually talk about football instead of all of these unamusing asides about this, that, and the other. So yeah, 1st of November 1961, Sunderland took on Middlesbrough, but what was the name of the one-off competition that we were playing in that day?
Oh, there we go. And it's not the Smoggy Cup, I don't think, is it?
Oh, well, you've given the game away now, Martin. No. Bizarrely enough, Middlesbrough didn't agree to playing in the Smoggy Cup. It was a one-off tournament that was played in the 1961-62 season, and we'll have a bit chat about that, all things being well, next week.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kelvin, and thank you to Andrew. We'll leave Andrew to dream of Britton Nichols and his soccer sausage, I think, after this one. And thank you to everybody for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of On This Week, and back tomorrow, I think, with another Q&A pod. So until next time, it's goodbye from us.
Podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Find the biggest voices in sports on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Like Fight Disciples, with me, Adam Catterall, and my good mate, Nick Peet. Your ultimate podcast for everything boxing and MMA. Join us all this week from Abu Dhabi as we bring you closer to the action when Tom Aspinall defends his UFC heavyweight title against Cyril Gane. Whether you're a hardcore fan or just starting out, we've got something for you. Search Fight Disciples and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.